The best part about training camp every year is that anything can happen and anyone can make a name for themselves, but nobody has raised their stock during this year's training camp more than KLS and Nikko Reed.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, you can subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, when Mike Williams unexpectedly retired, I think Charger fans were wondering who was going to be able to supply the spectacular, the ability to go up and get the football, and so far, KLS has answered that call. It's been very exciting watching what he's done so far in training camp. And on the defensive side, a guy who's just been all over the football field, an undrafted free agent trying to be the next undrafted free agent to pave his path in the NFL. Nikko Reed is going crazy on the defensive side. And conversely, as far as the people who are trending in the opposite direction, unfortunately, Najee Harris with the injury, haven't been able to see him on the football field, and it just seems like Junior Colson isn't quite comfortable in the NFL quite yet.
I think the important thing as far as, a stock report during training camp is just what the expectations are, right? And I think at least for Najee Harris, it was to compete to start. Feels like that has gone out the window. I think you could say the same thing about Junior Colson, at least as far as the expectation. There's probably still some time for him, though. But let's start with the good parts of it, David. And I think we have to start offensively with Keandre Lambert-Smith, just because, again, what the expectations were. This is a guy who came in as the second wide receiver drafted by this team this year, a guy who was drafted in the 5th round, not necessarily a draft pick that you would have super high expectations for. And now it feels like he had, from what he's been able to do at camp, especially with the spectacular, and that's why he's going to stand out, right? It might not be 5 catches every practice, but the catches and the big plays that he's made have stood out so much because of how they were made and because of the, just sideline awareness, the ability to show the body control in the hands to make those difficult catches, but also backing it up in the preseason game and being kind of the lone standout offensive skill player in that game has definitely made it that Keandre Lambert-Smith stock, even with Keenan Allen returning, has shot through the roof during this training camp.
It truly has, and I think it's been really fun to watch. I know I've seen the videos from everybody posting from training camp, and KLS has been a stalwart and has been a mainstay, making plays left, right, and center. It's one thing also to do it in training camp practices, right, where the conditions are a little bit different, but it's entirely different to be able to take the play in practice and then be able to translate it on the field against a live opponent. And I think what he showed in that preseason game, in the Hall of Fame game, was everything you wanted to see. The ability to track the football over his shoulder, to be able to shake the defender in front of him, and then the touchdown was just a chef's kiss. His ability to just break the defender's ankles, get open quickly, and be able to scamper right into the end zone for a beautiful touchdown. Everything so far for KLS has been way, way more than anybody has expected, and you can't, I think, see it any other way than seeing his stock rise exponentially.
And I think overall you feel pretty good about the offensive skill weapons, especially for rookies, whether it's, Keandre Lambert-Smith, who I'd say is the standout during training camp the most.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We saw Rondé Gadsden have a huge game, or a huge day at least, during mandatory minicamp, where he kind of put his name out there and has made plays consistently, but hasn't had that kind of big giant day that maybe KLS has had at this point. And Trey Harris, maybe had his best practice of the week last week. So, he is someone that definitely has kind of been up and down a little bit more, maybe hasn't kind of separated himself just as someone that has to get on the field. It feels like they have to find a way to get Keandre Lambert-Smith on the field with or without Keenan Allen, especially just because of the explosive ability that he brings. But the guy throwing it to him has definitely been one of the guys who's raised his stock the most, and that was Trey Lance, because it is about expectations. And Trey Lance going into this, not a joke necessarily, but very much so an afterthought, and someone that we said on this show would have a very long road to being able to actually get himself into the QB2 battle, because just Taylor Heineke's kind of record, him being with the team already a year and having a leg up in that situation, and the Chargers obviously going out there and trading for him to go get a stable backup behind Justin Herbert. Not only, I mean, has Trey Lance entered into the conversation, right? Like, he is very, very much a threat to take that QB2 spot, might be the QB2 right now. Obviously, we didn't get to see Taylor Heineke, so that makes it a little bit tougher on him. But just from the plays in camp that were backed up by the game that we saw, which is obviously him playing a pretty flawless game for the most part, with no turnovers, gets the 2 touchdowns, just looked calm and composed, didn't have really any big bad plays in that game. Trey Lance, from where he started when they signed him, to us being kind of like, what the hell is going on, to where he's at now after that last game, has to keep doing it. But so far, man, his stock has gone way up.
Well, and I think the reason why it's a little bit hard to see or hard to comprehend right now is because the last image of Trey Lance in your mind was him getting picked off 4 or 5 times in a preseason game.
Yeah. 5 times and lost a fumble too.
Right.
6 turnovers.
And so, that's, leaving a bad taste in your mouth. And so when the Chargers, acquire him, and it's like, what are they thinking? This guy looked horrible the last time he was on the football field. Last time we remember seeing him on a football field. But to their credit, it seems like they've instilled confidence in him. Jim Harbaugh, I think, is notorious for that, for being a player's coach, for being able to, give them what they need. And I think for Trey Lance, he needed an opportunity. He needs somebody to believe in him. And sometimes, when you receive the message and someone else is telling you a different way, you receive it better. And I think for Trey Lance in that football game, he looked composed. He showed touch. He showed accuracy. He protected the football, and he made plays in that football game. So I think it was a great performance for him, and he needs to continue to replicate that, but all signs definitely pointing up for Trey Lance.
Yeah, I think if the season started tomorrow, he'd probably be QB2. Obviously, we haven't seen Taylor Heinicke yet, but I think they obviously really, maybe not simplified the offense. I'm sure that was part of it, but they were able to tailor the offense to his skill set. And that's, I think, what they wanted to know. So I think they love the fact that they know, hey, if something were to happen to Justin Herbert, we can scheme up around this guy and be successful with him. He has to keep it going. But that's a great start for Trey Lance. And I'll have 3 more games to kind of back up what we saw in that first game and not have that huge mistake game where he turns the ball over 2 to 3 times. One more shout out here. Shout out to Kimani Vidal. There are a lot of guys you could go with as far as stock up, especially because when you're hearing the reports, a lot of the positives definitely are what are up there, But I would say, again, it's about expectations. And this is a guy who went into camp potentially fighting for a roster spot. Feels like he has been RB2 with Najee Harris out so far, and I don't necessarily think he surpassed Najee if Najee were to come back and get fully up to speed, but I think he did a good job of knowing, hey, there's a little bit of heat on me this year, and kind of distancing himself a little bit, or at least doing everything he can to hold off those other guys who might be coming for that job.
Yeah, because he started hot. The first thing we see from Kimani Vidal is a beautiful wheel route that turned into a touchdown the very first time he touched the football. But after that, it just didn't seem like he was able to recreate that same level of magic. And so in the preseason so far, I like what I've seen. It's 9 carries, 37 yards, 2 touchdowns, which I think were a little bit different in nature. One showing some physicality up the middle, the other being able to showcase speed and win the edge and be able to break through and score a touchdown there. Also had a long of 16, and also I think was solid in pass protection as well, which is something we know you absolutely have to be able to do. But injuries to other people has presented opportunities for Kimani Vidal, and it seems like so far he's making the most of them, but he has to continue to stack good days because there's a lot of competition in that room.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he did show kind of that extra gear that Greg Roman talked about with him when they were talking him up in the offseason. But you're right. I mean, one wrinkle into this conversation is that, first of all of the running backs played really well in that first game. We've been hearing about Kimani Vidal throughout camp, so that's why he gets this spot. But you could go with, a couple of different guys. Naheem Miller-Hines had, a good game in that first game as well. Hassan Haskins had the best run I've seen from him as a Chargers player in that game as well. So the big one is Rocket Sanders was back at practice yesterday, and that was the guy who was the hot name to potentially surpass Kimani Vidal when we went into this. he missed time. His stock has gone down, not necessarily to a fault of his own, but now he's back out there, and reportedly, at least from Daniel Popper, at that last practice, vision looked good, explosiveness looked good, and he might have something to say about that running back room once he gets in his first preseason game. But really excited to see what happens to that group. Really excited to see what Nikko Reed is able to do in his sophomore game of the preseason after he really did everything he could and has already went from somebody who was not on our radar at all to someone who absolutely has a chance to make this roster. So we're going to talk about some defensive players who have really raised their stock so far and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. You know me, it's about baseball for me right now, and I'm going with the red-hot San Diego Padres and all of the great trade deadline additions that they made. But if you don't just, aren't confident the Padres are always going to win, that's the great thing about FanDuel. You can go with who is going to hit a home run, which is one of my absolute favorite things on there, as well as, somebody to get 1 hit or 2 hits or 3 hits, whatever you want, you can find on FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. To bet on all of these things going on in the summer sports landscape, open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. We talked about some offensive players, David, that had really raised their stock so far during training camp, and that's what we're focusing on here, right? What have players done from the moment this training camp started to where we are at right now? And I think if you're talking about that, there is a great argument to be made that nobody has raised their stock as much as Nikko Reed. Nikko Reed, and again, it's about expectations. It's from where you started, right? Nobody knew who Nikko Reed was going into training camp for the most part, right? He was one of, several undrafted free agent corners that were brought in. And they also drafted Triquez Bridges, who was the guy we were kind of all watching out for to be like, okay, well, he's going to have a good camp to kind of make that 6th cornerback spot if they go in that direction. And then Nikko Reed totally just burst onto the scene in training camp. At one point, he has 4 pass breakups and, a pass breakup in 4 consecutive practices. He picks off Justin Herbert in 2 out of 3 practices at one point, which is nothing to sneeze at all. But I think the most important thing, again, was him backing it up. Like, he is like Keandre Lambert-Smith in the scenario where not only did he put his name out there during training camp and start getting some first-team reps and getting some of that attention, he went out there and backed it up in the game. And I think that's why Nikko Reed has to kick things off on the defensive side as far as guys who have absolutely raised their stock so far.
Yeah, I mean, you come to the Chargers as an undrafted free agent because there's a rich history here. There's that ability that you feel like there's a real pathway to be able to make this team and to be able to make an impact. The list of names is very, very long. Obviously, we just saw an undrafted free agent just join the Hall of Fame with Antonio Gates. So for Nikko Reed, he has been making plays all over the place. And as Jesse Minter said, make a play a day and people will start knowing your name. And I think right now, if you're following the Chargers, there's no way you don't know the name Nikko Reed because he's been able to take the play on the practice field and be able to showcase it in the game with the physical pass breakups, being sticky in coverage, and of course, grabbing that interception and almost taking it back to the house, making it look just like he deserves to be on that field. He belongs on that field. And if he continues to play this way, it's not practice squad for Nikko Reed. It's trying to get to that 53-man roster because it's been a very exciting watch for Nikko Reed.
Yeah, there's a reason they put him on the podium, right? You don't see a lot of undrafted free agents getting that time with the press. And there's a reason for that. And it's because the dude's been so impressive, because he's squarely put himself into roster contention. And I agree that he could very well make this roster. Now, this is kind of the snag with Nikko Reed right now. He hasn't been out of practice the last couple of days. And that is the quickest way to kind of get yourself out of that conversation, is not being out there. Because the thing is this, I don't think he could be much more impressive than he has been so far. That being said, if he were to miss the rest of training camp in the preseason, which I'm not saying he will, he probably doesn't make the team. And that's just how life goes. You have to be able to do it. Now, if he misses one game this week and is able to play in the last two, I think he'll very likely still have a good shot to make the team. But that's the quickest way to get out of the conversation. So I think that's with Nikko Reed, obviously someone, who was not on our radar at all. And someone that if we had to make our own 53-man roster prediction and it was ending today, I could not leave him off my opening roster if that was the case. But let's talk about another guy, another undrafted free agent at one point, but somebody who stuck around, a journeyman a little bit, that is making his case for the roster, and that's Caleb Murphy, edge rusher, formerly of Grand Valley State and Ferris State, someone on the smaller levels of collegiate football that all he's done since being in the NFL is kind of overcome the odds and make initial 53-man roster. So this is someone who Daniel Popper's been talking about for a couple of weeks now. And one of the things he talks about is he's on this starting punt group, right? Being on the starting special teams unit of any specific special teams is a great sign that they're considering you, to make the team potentially, because they're trying to get those guys as many reps as possible. Ryan Ficken doesn't mess around. And this is also a guy, David, that was with the Chargers some last year, signed to their practice squad last year, did get activated for several games in a special teams capacity. Someone that Ryan Ficken called out, a couple of weeks ago is someone, hey, Caleb Murphy's been doing a good job on special teams too. We haven't been factoring him in because he would seem to be, edge rusher 5 going into training camp, but he's very much edge rusher 4 so far, and someone to have on your radar as a special teams ace potentially who showed what he could do even in the first game on the first play of the game.
He sure did. Yeah, he forced a fumble. And so, hey,
he held the guy up to get the fumble force. He held the guy up, and Kendall Williamson punched it out.
Yeah, so he was able to set up that play, but he was in the right place at the right time. And also, I feel like he was able to make an impact as a pass rusher as well when you got on the field on defense. So for Caleb Murphy, if he continues to play with his hair on fire like that and be able to set up plays on special teams, then that is definitely going to be a pathway to be able to make this roster. And, for him, the competition in the room right now is Kyle Kennard, and we haven't really seen much from Kyle Kennard, and we might be able to get into him a little bit later in the show here. But for Caleb Murphy, he just needs to worry about himself every single day, being out there on that football field, making an impact. And if you're an edge rusher and you're getting after the quarterback, then teams are going to try to find a spot for you.
Yeah, as a pass rusher, 2 quarterback hits and 2 defensive tackles in the game as well, which obviously plays for sure, showing that you can kind of do it all. But like I said, signed as an undrafted free agent with the Tennessee Titans in 2023, made the team that year as an undrafted free agent. Now, he appeared in 3 games as a rookie, and then the next year he goes into it, makes the team, and his second season then gets waived last year in October before ending up with the Chargers, who picked him up pretty quickly. But he has already improbably made 2 rosters as an undrafted free agent in 2023 and 2024. So he should very much be on your radar of guys who can make a push for it this year, especially with 3 preseason games left and having, already some impressive practices and some impressive moments so far in camp. Let's go to one more here, David, one that we couldn't pick a single guy for this one. So for this one, we had to say stock is up for the entire interior defensive line group. I mean, all of these guys have had moments at some point, You have Tito Abonia going out there and having a great get-off during that first game, backing up what we've heard coming out of practice and ragdolling some dudes in that game, which for someone that size is great. You have Justin Aboigbe, who's had a really big day and was really trending in a great direction before getting injured last week. Tier Tart has performed so well, he wasn't even playing in that first game. But it does feel like, in general, the stock is up for this room because, once again, it felt like a room that had major question marks and might be a weakness on this team. But everything we've heard coming out of practice and even what we saw in that game is the exact opposite.
Mike Elston, the Chargers defensive line coach, is saying, you better never doubt me and my ability to be able to whip a room into shape, and it absolutely looks that way. From Jamari Caldwell to Otito Abonia to pretty much anybody that's been cycling through on that defensive line room, they've been making an impact. They've been looking good. They've been able to make an impact on the football field, and that is extremely positive because, yeah, it was a concern. But I don't think I'm very concerned anymore. I think my trust level in Mike Elston and his ability to extract greatness out of his group, I think, has substantially increased for me. And so I like what I've seen so far. And when Jim Harbaugh says I ain't worried about the defensive line, we probably should have listened last year. We're not hearing anything about it being a problem this year, and I don't think it is. It looks like that group, that room, is ready to play.
Mike Elston always gets the benefit of the doubt with us, especially, with what he helped Poona Ford do, with what he helped Tier Tar do, kind of, giving his career a resurgence, So I think the thing is it just feels like this group has a very high floor because they can, cycle in 6 guys potentially in that room, which is just such a huge help. Hard to replace the overall talent with an approach that's by committee. At the same time, it feels like they have the guys that could do that, right? And who will be kind of the standout guy, who becomes the Poona Ford this year, that will determine what the ceiling is for that group. But it does feel like the floor, especially after a year of running this defense at the NFL level, Mike Elston knew what he wanted to get a Deshaun Hand, to get a Naquan Jones. And now it feels like he has a group, especially size-wise, that he feels like he can work with. But for all of the good comes the bad. And although it was a freak thing, hard to say that anyone's stock has fallen during training camp more than Najee Harris, who went in as a potential starter and now feels like very much in question to even play at the beginning of this season. So we're going to talk about him and some other guys whose stock has fallen at training camp so far and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year, and NFL kickoff is almost here. And that means fantasy football season is back in full swing, and this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy of football experience like never before. This year, me, David, and the Locked On Chargers podcast are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. This is something that me and my leagues switched to several years ago, getting tired of the one we were using before. We said, okay, let's try Yahoo Fantasy, and I was so pleased to see how easy it was, and also just the amount of information that you can get and just how simple it is if you need to make a last-second adjustment to your lineup or you want to figure out who the best plug-and-play player is, you could stream for that week. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. And to kick it off, they just dropped the Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's only one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into classics, you can still play the head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. But stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. David, we still have more to get into because we did want to talk about the guys whose training camp stock has not been raised, to say the least, during camp so far in 2025. And those ones are a little tougher because obviously you're going to hear most of the positives. But there's several guys here where it would just be really hard to make an argument that they've raised their stock so far. But thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts from. Dave, let's get into the guys whose stock has dropped so far during training camp. This is a guy that you brought up, and maybe it doesn't feel like it's performance-based more than it just is a lack of being able to show anything because you haven't been on the field. And it has to start with Najee Harris, who even without being out there, feels like his stock has dropped so much. And I think a lot of that is because you potentially lost a starting spot due to an avoidable situation that has now cost you this much time.
Yeah, it absolutely has. And right now, I think also we don't know what's going on. We still don't really have any information.
We don't know if he has two eyes. Right?
Exactly.
Like that's how little we know at this point, for sure.
We haven't seen anything, right? We see him now with, whatever, a helmet or whatever whatever thing he's using to cover his eyes.
Big glasses, a helmet with a visor, like
right.
It's
doing laps, walking laps around the practice field, right? We just don't know anything that's going on. We don't know the extent of this injury. We don't know if he's going to be able to come back and play at all this year. And so the more time that he's not on the football field is more time that he can't be able to learn the offense and then be able to program that muscle memory because he is a new, free agent to this football team too. And so I'm sure they've done some installs and stuff, but he's missing valuable time. So I don't think how you can look at this in any other way other than seeing Najee Harris stock go down.
Yeah, and we talked about the rest of the running backs, right? We haven't seen or heard too much about Omarion Hampton, just that he's kind of the for sure running back one on this team, and nothing that we saw, even in a small sample size, gave you anything to think differently about that in his first preseason game. But it felt like going into it that even, Najee Harris, as that veteran, as a known commodity, still had a chance to be the technical starter or at least be in a split backfield with Omarion Hampton. It just doesn't feel like that now. And I get what you're saying too, especially like from the mental side. I'm not as worried about it because he's been there, right? He's there for these different things that they're installing in the meetings and all of those things. And we hear he's in there and locked in, and they're saying everything he can do. But on the field, he's getting the Desmond Watson treatment. If you don't know who that is, that's the 450-pound player that the Buccaneers have that actually can't even participate in training camp left, and all he does is walk around the field with a weighted vest on. To me, it's much more about the physical side of things with Najee Harris, because this isn't something where he gets cleared tomorrow and all of a sudden, he's in NFL game shape and ready to go. We're getting dangerously close to the point where it's even if he does get activated or it gets cleared physically tomorrow, what does the ramp up period look like for him before you're willing to go put him out there with live bullets flying past him? So that's what really, could he be back week 1? Sure. He's out there. He's walking around the field.
Doesn't feel that way.
I mean, there's really just nothing to tell you either direction. And I think that's the hard thing. But one thing you can say with pretty much certainty is that the stock has gone down, because we were still pretty bullish on what he could do, even in tandem with what Omarion Hampton brings as a first-round pick. But we have to talk about Junior Colson in this part too, David, just because, again, it's about expectations. We went into camp hopeful that he could start, but so far there hasn't been anything that makes us feel like he has a chance for that starting spot yet.
I wanted to see the growth, right? I wanted to see him take his game to the next level. I wanted to see him finally feel comfortable and be decisive and fly around like we saw in college. But unfortunately, we haven't seen that yet. It looked a little bit jittery, a little bit indecisive on the football field. Haven't seen any kind of breakout practice days. We've heard some good reps here and there, but we haven't seen the consistency of the performance. And we want to see a guy out there in the preseason that looks like he's a man among boys, that's ready to take that next step to be that, next starting linebacker for the Chargers. But unfortunately, we haven't seen that yet. He hasn't been able to provide that. So it seems like, it's going to take a little bit more time for things to click for Junior Colson.
And it sucks because, we had Daniel Popper saying only a little over a week ago that he might have had his best practice on the Chargers that Popper had seen. And that was a hugely encouraging development. But unlike what we saw with, a Caleb Murphy or even a Nikko Reed, we didn't get the follow-up in the actual game action. And that is the kind of more concerning part, is when you see him out there, it still just felt like there is a gap between where he is now and where he needs to be a meaningful contributor and to be an actual starter on this defense. I mean, from what we've heard about the rotations and where he's at on the actual depth chart, not the unofficial depth chart, right? It's Dayon, it's Denzel Perryman, it's Troy Dye, and then it's Junior Colson in that order. That's what we know from who's playing with what teams, first or second team defenses. So some flashes, but the first showcase moment in the preseason just wasn't a great performance by him. But there's one more guy I want to mention here, a guy you brought up earlier a little bit, and that's Kyle Kennard. And this is someone who at least has been out there. And I think the biggest thing is David obviously just had a very kind of so-so whatever preseason game. Hasn't had the flashes coming out of the practice reports that even we've seen with Junior Colson. And I think the part that's scary about Kyle Kennard is you just don't want to see him being this year's Justin Herbert, man, and kind of just being banished to the land of healthy scratches. Because I don't think there's a chance that he doesn't make this roster, because I think you have to keep him as a 4th-round pick, and there's potential there. But, man, you don't want to see him getting in that same boat where he's just really an afterthought defensively once the season starts.
Yeah, they kind of see what they have, and they basically redshirt him for a year. That's essentially what they did for Justin Herbert. And so for Kyle Kennard, we just haven't seen him be able to produce any kind of standout practices. And in the game, he was kind of invisible. He's been a guy that's been able to, hold up and run support, which is positive. But hey, man, at the edge rusher position, it's all about that flash, all about that sizzle, being able to get after the quarterback, cause havoc, and be able to put pressure on that and unfortunately, we haven't been able to see it from Kyle Kennard. So the stock is definitely a little bit down for him right now.
Yeah, and it's only one game where we've actually got to put our own eyes on him. But I was watching him in the game, and it just felt like a little passive. Like I didn't see the same juice. I didn't see the same kind of challenge that he brought to some of the best tackles in college football last year, where, you know, he was taking lunch money from Will Campbell as a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
Like that's just, you know, why I'm a little bit surprised. You're talking about, you know, the National Defensive Player of the Year last year in college football, who led the SEC in sacks. It'd be hard to see that and feel good about that if you were watching him in that last game. So we were both very high on what Kyle Kennard would bring to the table. And the interesting thing is the flashes he has had are the physicality and him being, you know, better in the run game, which is something I thought would take him much more time than being able to be a situational pass rusher, right? But right now he's at best 5th on the depth chart. And if we're going by just who played, I mean, Caleb Murphy is 4th right now just based on, you know, merit, right? As far as what they've been able to do so far in training camp. Edge rusher 5 might be Tremont Morris Brash, just as far as productivity. That's a dude who had 4 pressures and led the team in pressures in that last game.
Yeah.
This guy had 0 pressures and 14 pass rush snaps and 1 tackle and 23 total snaps in Kyle Kennard's case. Again, very small sample size, but if you're talking about whose stock is up and whose stock is down, at this point, you cannot put Kyle Kennard in the stock up. I will tell you that at the very least. So there's also, you know, some honorable mentions. Dale Von Campbell is an offensive guy, you know, deserves a shout out. All the running backs, you know, have played pretty well so far. Steve O'Klotz has had some moments as well. Excited to see maybe some more of him in this next game. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. We'll be back with the latest out of the Chargers padded practice on Thursday, and also getting to a little bit of a preview of what we are excited to see in game 2 of the preseason. Maybe we'll hear from Jim Harbaugh. Will we get some update on whether maybe some starters are playing in this game or not? But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen. You guys are the best fans out there, and we appreciate you always checking out the show every single day. And it also goes beyond the show, because I know David has a special shout out to the everydayers out there who definitely made his day.
Thank you guys so much for your incredible generosity. I put a post out about my sister who's unfortunately suffering from cervical cancer and going through treatment of radiation and chemo and has been unable to work. And, you know, just the unbelievable generosity that you guys showed blew me away and caused me to, you know, have to tear up a little bit because of what you've been able to provide for me. And so I thank you so much. You know, we love you. You know, we appreciate all of your support. And this is just another way, another reminder of why you guys are the best fans in the world.
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of times when we're doing this, it's pre-recorded. We're talking into the void. We don't know how people are going to react to things. But then you see something like this, and this happens not just in this situation, but it's happened to us over the past few years at least, right, where you really sit back and say, man, we really have the best fans. And it's so cool for us to be able to attract good people, you know, not just great fans, but good people as well. And I was definitely moved by the support of our fans to just jump on and help someone who needs it. Not enough of that in this world, in my opinion, at the moment. That was really, really cool to see. So thank you to the everydayers out there, as always, for making us your first listen and for checking us out every day, which you know you can do by subscribing to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from, and finding us on all of our social media at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So we'll be back with you guys tomorrow. It's a little different because it's going to be a kind of a game preview, but we also have a live padded practice tomorrow that we can't wait to hear from. Hopefully we're hearing from the head man in charge as well. But thank you guys again. As always, we're back with you tomorrow with all of the latest. But until then, take it easy and go Bulls.